The soft glow of chandeliers cast warm light across the elegant dining room of Meridian Restaurant as Jessica Walsh adjusted her 4-year-old daughter Lily's sweater for the third time. At 28, Jessica had been working double shifts as a pediatric nurse to make ends meet since her divorce. And tonight's dinner was supposed to be a rare evening out with a man her friend had insisted was perfect for her. She was beginning to suspect. Her friend's definition of perfect was very different from her own. "Mommy, why does that man keep looking at his phone?" Lily whispered, clutching her small stuffed dinosaur as she observed Jessica's date with the astute judgment that only children possess. Jessica glanced across the table at Bradley Morrison, a pharmaceutical sales representative who had spent the last 45 minutes discussing his income, his expensive car, and his opinion that single mothers should focus on finding stability rather than pursuing careers. He had also made it clear that children should be seen and not heard after Lily had politely asked about the fish in the restaurant's aquarium. "Some people aren't very good at conversations." "Sweetheart," Jessica replied quietly, her patience wearing thin as Bradley continued scrolling through his phone while simultaneously complaining about the restaurant's service. At a table across the dining room, 35-year-old CEO David Chen sat alone, mechanically cutting his steak while trying to look like he was enjoying his solitary dinner. As the founder of Chen Technologies, David had grown accustomed to eating alone, his demanding schedule leaving little time for meaningful relationships. Tonight he had chosen this particular restaurant, hoping its bustling atmosphere might make him feel less isolated. Instead, he found himself inadvertently eavesdropping on the conversation at the nearby table, where a beautiful woman with kind eyes was clearly struggling through what appeared to be a disastrous date. The little girl with her was well-behaved and articulate, asking thoughtful questions that her mother answered with patient warmth, while her date barely acknowledged either of them. "Look, Jessica," Bradley was saying as he finally put down his phone, "I think we need to be realistic here. You're a nice enough girl, but dating someone with a kid is complicated. And frankly, I don't think you understand what men in my position are looking for." David watched Jessica's face flush with embarrassment and anger, her protective instincts clearly warring with her desire to maintain civility in front of her daughter. "What position would that be exactly?" Jessica asked, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Successful, established, ready for a real relationship," Bradley replied condescendingly. "Not someone who's going to be distracted by playdates and parent-teacher conferences." Lily looked up at her mother with concern, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand the words. "Mommy, are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby," Jessica said softly, though David could see she was anything but fine. "Honestly, I don't know why Sarah thought this would work," Bradley continued, oblivious to the pain he was causing. "You're clearly not ready to prioritize a relationship, and I don't have time to compete with a child for attention." That was the moment David saw Jessica's composure crack. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her purse, clearly preparing to leave but struggling with how to extract herself gracefully from the situation. Without thinking, David stood up and walked over to their table, his business instincts kicking in as he recognized someone in need of assistance. "Jessica," he said warmly, as if they were old friends. "I'm so sorry I'm late. Traffic was absolutely terrible." Jessica looked up at him in confusion, but something in David's kind eyes and reassuring smile made her play along. "Oh, David, there you are. I was starting to worry." Bradley looked between them with obvious annoyance. "Excuse me, but we're in the middle of dinner here." "Actually," Jessica said, standing up and helping Lily gather her things, "I think our dinner is finished." "Bradley, thank you for the meal, but I don't think this is going to work out." "You've got to be kidding me," Bradley said, his voice rising slightly. "You're leaving me for this guy?" "I'm leaving because you've made it clear that my daughter and I aren't what you're looking for," Jessica replied with quiet dignity. "And that's perfectly fine, because you're not what we're looking for either." David gently placed his hand on Jessica's elbow, a gesture of support that she found surprisingly comforting. "Shall we go? I believe I promised Lily we'd get ice cream." Lily's eyes lit up at the mention of ice cream, and she immediately took David's hand with the trusting nature of a child who sensed a kind adult. "Are you my mommy's friend?" "I hope so," David said seriously, looking down at the little girl. "And I hope we can be friends too. I like your dinosaur. What's his name?" "It's a her, and her name is Petra," Lily corrected with the confidence of someone who knew her dinosaurs. "She's a triceratops and she's very brave." "She sounds wonderful," David replied, and Jessica could tell he genuinely meant it. As they walked out of the restaurant together, Jessica felt a mixture of gratitude and bewilderment. This stranger had rescued her from an uncomfortable situation with such grace that she almost believed they really were old friends. "Thank you," she said quietly as they stood outside the restaurant. "You didn't have to do that, but I appreciate it more than you know." "That man was treating you terribly," David said simply. "No one deserves that, especially not in front of their child." Jessica studied his face in the soft light from the restaurant windows, noting the sincerity in his expression and the way he had naturally included Lily in their conversation. "You mentioned ice cream. Did you really mean that, or were you just helping me make an exit?" "I never make promises to children that I don't intend to keep," David replied seriously. "There's a gelato place about 2 blocks from here that's supposed to be excellent." "That is, if you don't mind extending our fake friendship for a little while longer. Can we really get ice cream?" Lily asked, bouncing slightly with excitement. Jessica looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at David's patient smile, and made a decision that would change all their lives. "I think that sounds perfect." Over gelato at the small Italian cafe, Jessica learned that David was nothing like the men she usually encountered. He asked thoughtful questions about her work as a pediatric nurse, listened with genuine interest to Lily's detailed explanations of different dinosaur species, and shared stories about his own childhood that made both mother and daughter laugh. "You're really good with kids," Jessica observed as David helped Lily navigate the challenge of eating gelato without making a mess. "I like children," David replied simply. "They're honest about what they think and feel. Adults could learn a lot from that kind of authenticity." "Do you have kids of your own?" Jessica asked, then immediately felt embarrassed by the personal question. "No," David said, and something wistful flickered across his features. "I always thought I would, but work became my priority, and somehow the years slipped by. I wake up most mornings in an empty house, eat breakfast alone, and go to sleep wondering what I'm really building all this success for." The honesty of his admission surprised Jessica. Most successful men she encountered were eager to emphasize their achievements, not question their purpose. "What kind of work do you do?" she asked. "I run a technology company," David said simply, not mentioning that Chen Technologies employed over 3,000 people or that he had been featured on the cover of Fortune magazine the previous year. As the evening progressed, Jessica found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't experienced since before her divorce. David was easy to talk to, genuinely interested in her thoughts and experiences, and wonderful with Lily, who had decided he was her new favorite person. "David, do you want to see my dinosaur collection?" Lily asked as they prepared to leave the cafe. "I have 17 different kinds, and I know all their names and what they ate." "I would love to see your collection," David replied seriously. 17 dinosaurs sounds like quite an impressive museum. Jessica felt her heart warm at his response. Most men either ignored Lily entirely or treated her like an inconvenience to be tolerated. David spoke to her daughter like she was an interesting person whose opinions mattered. "Lily, sweetie, I'm sure David has other things he needs to do tonight," Jessica said gently. "Actually, I don't," David admitted. "If you don't mind the company, I genuinely enjoy learning about dinosaurs from an expert." Back at Jessica's modest apartment, David sat cross-legged on the living room floor while Lily carefully arranged her dinosaur collection and explained the characteristics of each species. Jessica watched from the kitchen as she prepared tea, marveling at how naturally this sophisticated man adapted to her daughter's world. "This is amazing. Lily, David said, examining a small stegosaurus with the attention he usually reserved for quarterly reports. How did you learn so much about dinosaurs? Mommy takes me to the library every week and we read books together, Lily explained proudly. And sometimes we watch documentaries, but only the ones that aren't too scary. Your mom sounds very smart, David said, glancing up at Jessica with an expression that made her heart skip. She's the smartest mommy in the whole world, Lily declared with absolute certainty. She helps sick kids get better, and she makes the best pancakes. And she reads me stories every night even when she's really tired. David felt something shift inside his chest as he listened to this little girl describe her mother with such pure love and admiration. He looked at Jessica, who was blushing at her daughter's praise, and realized he was seeing something he had never encountered in his business world, a woman whose greatest achievement was the love and respect of her child. Lily, it's getting late, Jessica said gently. You need to get ready for bed. Can David read me a story? Lily asked hopefully. Oh, sweetheart, I'm sure David needs to get home, Jessica replied, though she found herself hoping he might stay a little longer. I'd be honored to read you a story, David said, and Jessica could tell he meant it. 20 minutes later, David found himself sitting on the edge of Lily's small bed, reading The Brave Little Dinosaur, while Lily snuggled under her covers with Petra the Triceratops. David, Lily said sleepily as he finished the story, are you going to be my mommy's boyfriend? Jessica, who had been listening from the doorway, felt her face burn with embarrassment. Lily, that's not something you ask people. But David just smiled gently at the little girl. Lily, your mommy is pretty wonderful, and so are you. I hope we can all be good friends. I hope so too, Lily said, already drifting off to sleep. Mommy needs someone nice, and you're the nicest person I've met in a really long time. As they returned to the living room, Jessica felt the need to apologize for her daughter's directness. I'm sorry about that. She doesn't really understand. Don't apologize, David interrupted gently. She's right. You do deserve someone nice. Actually, you deserve someone extraordinary. Jessica felt tears prick her eyes at the sincerity in his voice. David, I don't know how to thank you for tonight. You turned what could have been a terrible evening into something really special. You don't need to thank me, David replied. You gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. What's that? David looked around the small apartment, taking in the evidence of a life built around love rather than achievement. Lily's artwork on the refrigerator, family photos on the side tables, books scattered around with care and attention. A reminder of what really matters, he said quietly. I've spent the last 10 years building a company, accumulating success, and telling myself that achievement was enough. But sitting here tonight, reading to Lily and talking with you, I remember what it feels like to be part of something that actually means something. 6 months later, David stood in the same living room, but now it was filled with moving boxes as Jessica and Lily prepared to move into his house. The transition had been gradual and careful, with David taking time to prove that his feelings were genuine and his commitment to both mother and daughter was real. Are you sure about this? Jessica asked as she taped up another box of Lily's toys. Once we move in together, there's no going back to your quiet, orderly bachelor life. David laughed, thinking about how much his life had changed since that evening at Meridian Restaurant. His house now had dinosaur books on the coffee table, children's artwork on the refrigerator, and the sound of laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent for too long. Jessica, that quiet, orderly life was slowly killing me, he said, pulling her into his arms. You and Lily didn't just rescue me from loneliness. You showed me what I was really working toward all these years. And what's that? Jessica asked, smiling up at him. A family, David replied simply. A home filled with love instead of achievements. A reason to come home every night that has nothing to do with profit margins or quarterly reports. Lily ran into the room, carrying Petra and wearing the small engagement ring David had given her when he proposed to her mother, asking for permission to marry them both. David, in our new house. Can I have my dinosaur collection in the living room? She asked hopefully. Lily, our new house will have an entire room just for your dinosaur collection, David promised. With proper display cases and everything? Really? Lily's eyes went wide with excitement. "Really?" David confirmed. "Because when you love someone, you make space for the things that matter to them." As Jessica watched David and Lily plan the dinosaur room with serious attention to detail, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed from that awful blind date. She had walked into Meridian Restaurant expecting nothing more than a mediocre evening with a stranger, and instead had found the family she and Lily had always dreamed of having. Sometimes, she realized the most beautiful love stories begin not with fairy tale meetings, but with someone recognizing when you need to be rescued and having the courage to step in and help. David hadn't just saved her from an uncomfortable dinner. He had shown her that there were still good men in the world who understood that loving someone meant loving all of them, including the parts that came with responsibility and complexity. And the best part was that the rescue had gone both ways. Because while David had saved her from a terrible date, she and Lily had saved him from a life that was successful but empty, showing him that the greatest achievement of all is building a family based on love, laughter, and the willingness to make space for toy dinosaurs in the living room. If this story warmed your heart and reminded you that sometimes the worst dates can lead to the most beautiful beginnings, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to believe that their perfect family might be waiting in the most unexpected places. Subscribe for more stories about unexpected connections and the power of kindness, and let us know in the comments about a time when someone stepped in to help you when you needed it most. Sometimes the most important rescues happen when we least expect them.